Program Director wethu ubaba uSiboniso Duma, and Your Majesty the King, as well as Your Majesty the Queen, the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Umam Nomusa Dube Ngube, the ministers who are here present, and deputy ministers, the president of the Inkatha Freedom Party, Ubaba Tlhabisa, the members of parliament, the leaders of the African National Congress who are here present, as led by members of the National Executive Committee, MECs of our province here in KwaZulu-Natal, and members of the provincial legislature, former premiers of KwaZulu-Natal, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, no Ambassador Ndebele, Councillor Buthelezi, Mayor of Zululand District, and also the Prime Minister of His Majesty the King, Nkosi Shinga, the Chairperson of the Provincial House of Traditional and Khoisan Leaders, amakhosi onke akhona kanye nezinduna, abefundisi, nazo zonke inkokheli samaqembu ahlukahlukene. Ladies and gentlemen, I also greet you. Kuyinjabulo enkulu kakhulu kimi ukuba lapha kulomsebenzi obaluleke kangaka, lapho sikhumbula khona isilo esesesakhothama inkosi uDinuzulu kaCetshwayo kaMpande kasenza ngakhona. Your Majesty, it is a great honor to commemorate and celebrate the life of King Dinuzulu. Ngizawuthanda ukuthi ngikhulume ngesingesi nesizulu lapho nalapho ngoba lo msebenzi abantu abaningi lapha eNingizimu Afrika bamamele ukuthi uqhubeka kanjani. Sithanda ukuthi we must lift the image of this commemoration, sibeke kumphakathi wala eSouth Africa ukuthi abantu bakithi bala eSouth Africa bakwazi ukubona kahle ukuthi inkosi lena esikhumbulayo namhlanje bekiqhawe lamaqhawe phakathi kwabantu abaningi aba-akha lesizwe. Sibonise futhi ukuthi bekuyinkokheli yalo lonke leli lase South Africa, hayi kuphela lapha eKZN. Kulapho ngithi ngithanda ukuthi lokho esiza kusho abantu abaningi noma bakuphi na eLimpopo, eMpumalanga, eNorthwest, eWestern Cape bakwazi ukuqonda kahle ukuthi lenkosi lesisilo esisikhumbulayo namhlanje bekuwumuntu onjani na. It is Your Majesty for this reason that we honor and commemorate the life of your ancestor, King Dinuzulu, as we also celebrate 30 years of democracy and freedom. It is a freedom that many, including Cyril Dinuzulu, also fought for. Ukuze sibe lapha namhlanje sibuka leminyaka e30 edlulile, sifanele ukuthi sidlulele nasemuva sibone kahle ukuthi imisebenzi eyayenzwa ngabanye abeze phambi kwethu ukuthi bayenzeni na ukuthi sithole lenkululeko. We are here to pay homage to Inkosi Yamakhosi, a visionary and a freedom fighter who, despite the yoke of oppression and the bondage that was inflicted on him and his people, never wavered. Like many before him and elsewhere who led their people in fighting against the colonial invaders in our country, his fight was not only for one group of people or in one area. Impi wayilwa wayelwela sisonke abantu balapha eMzantsi Afrika. It was a collective struggle for freedom for all the oppressed people of South Africa, even though his fights and his battles were here in the KwaZulu-Natal theater. Since the colonizers first arrived on our soil, our forebears, the Khoi, the San, the Amaxhosa, the AmaZulu, Abesuthu, Abatswana, Abavenda, Amashangani, Amadzonga, Abapedi, Namaklu, and the Kwe, Amaswati, all took up arms in defense of our sovereignty, in defense of the land, and in defense of our people. Long before the founding of the African National Congress in 1912, it was the traditional and indigenous leaders who were at the forefront of the resistance against colonialism. Uma sikhumbula isilo uDinuzulu, sikhumbula namanye amaqhawe awalwela inkululeko. Amaqhawe afana nenkosi yamaKhoi, uCetshwayo, uMaqoma, uHintsa, inkosi zabaThembu, isilo esisikhumbula kahle futhi uCetshwayo owalwa namangesi wawahlulwa eSandlwana. Babaleka amangesi befake amajasi wabo abomvu wawashaya babaleka inkosi yethu uCetshwayo. Sikhumbula inkosi uMbambatha, sikhumbula inkosi uMampuru, Khosi Sikhukhuni wabapedi, sikhumbula uMakhado and uChibase wabavenda, sikhumbula nabanye abaningi babaTswana abalwa who were at the forefront of the wars of resistance. Traditional leaders like uDalindyebo Ngangelizwe of abaThembu and Indlovukazi of Amaswati, Lobatsibeni, Kwamile, each paid a large number of cattle to enroll respective people into their liberation movement. Cyril Dinuzulu was also amongst abaholi ababebezimisele bafaka isandla kulolu daba lwenkululeko yethu. So today, as we remember him, we remember the life of a great leader indeed. In 1912, he became the honorary life president of the then South African Native National Congress, which was the forerunner of the African National Congress. This was a prestigious position given to him that he still holds in the realm of spirituality. We remember him because he was a real fighter, born in 1868 near the present-day town of Mpangi. To his mother, uNomvimbi, Okamsweli of the Mzimelas, and his father, the then Prince Cetshwayo Kampande. Your Majesty, King Dinuzulu was dismissed as an uneducated rural youth. Like many, were just dismissed by the colonial and apartheid rulers who thought that people from the rural areas were up to nothing. And yet he was a gifted person with great wisdom beyond our imagination and wisdom that was given to him by his ancestors. And everything that we aspired to be as a person, as a nation, was clearly personified in King Dinuzulu. He was able to shepherd his people with great wisdom and with distinction. Wakhombisa kakhulu ukuhlakanipha nobuqhawe bakhe uma ekhokhela isizwe samaZulu. He became king at a very tender age, at 16 years in 1884, following the passing of his father, King Cetshwayo, in the same year. He suffered immensely because he was opposed to colonialism. He himself summarized the weight of his struggles when he said, "My sole crime is that I am the son of Cetshwayo. It beset me when I was a child and my father was taken away by the white people, and it is still besetting me. I could not bury my father, King Cetshwayo. He died while I was being chased. I did not bury my mother, Okamsweli. She died while I had been a prisoner. Nkosi, what is grievous is to be killed and yet alive." Close quotes. This level of sacrifice from a life so young would later become the hallmark of our struggle for freedom. Scores of young people, as epitomized by the generation of 1976, took a stand against the oppressive regime of apartheid. Others joined the armed struggle. His kingship journey was to have many ups and downs. The years between 1879 and 1887 were marked by intense colonial land theft and grab here in KwaZulu-Natal. The British colonial government refused to recognize him, although he was a king. They refused to recognize the king of our people. He was also met with resistance from the 13 kinglets that the colonial governments had appointed to rule over Zululand while King Cetshwayo was incarcerated in prison. And yet King Dinuzulu symbolized a new era that was beckoning for his kingdom. And that is why it is so important for us all as South Africans to know our history and to know those who contributed to the freedom that we enjoy today. The story of King Dinuzulu is being relegated to the back, and we must refuse that the heroic acts of our kings and leaders should be put in the dustbin of history. He resisted colonial incursions into the lands of his ancestors, fighting many wars against internal factions and the internal colonial garrisons. His efforts to restore the spirit of the rule of the House of Shaka landed him in prison, first in Pietermaritzburg, and then resulted in also banishment outside of this province, and also in the end landed him on an island of St. Helena between 1888 and 1898, an outpost island in the Atlantic Ocean where Napoleon Bonaparte, after being defeated in the wars in Europe, was also sent and where he died. Now, Napoleon Bonaparte had committed a number of things, but our king, Dinuzulu, had been sent to St. Helena, and they had hoped that he would die there. They sent him there just because he fought against colonialism, and that begumntwana wakaCyril Cetshwayo. While in prison, Cyril Dinuzulu could not be broken by his captors. In fact, it was whilst he was in prison that his resolve was strengthened, and that deepened his warrior spirit. Just like they tried to break the spirit of many of our other leaders. Inkokheli zethu ezifana noMaqoma, ezifana no Tatu Mandela, o Tatu Mbeki, nabanye abaningi abayiswa Robben Island, their spirit was never broken. Utatu Sisulu, nabanye babuya from that time of imprisonment rather, still stronger. They tried to do the same. Nesilo Dinuzulu, a whole king, just being incarcerated because he resisted colonialism. He knew too well that beyond the prison walls, the world was rapidly changing. Those who were out to destroy the kingdom yakwaZulu and to displace his people from their land were continuing with their efforts. He continued to fight against the many efforts that they made. King Dinuzulu embraced education, something that would go on to have a big impact on the Zulu royal household. His children, including Princess Magogo and her brother, King Solomon, were all sent to school because Isilo Dinuzulu strongly believed in education. He also became deeply involved in the arts. Earlier in his life, he had been a prolific composer of amahubo esiZulu. Uma ese-St. Helena, lapho bebemlahle khona becabanga ukuthi uzawufela khona, he played piano and the organ, and he developed uthando lwamaculo esonto, and he sang them in isiZulu nesingesi. This love for music led to the spread of choral music and other transitional styles like iskatamiya, maskandi, and many others, which are unique to the Zulu kingdom. Over the 30 years of our democracy and freedom, we've been working to defeat the legacies of colonialism and apartheid, and to break the intergenerational poverty that was imposed on our people. Ngoba bathe mabesithathela umhlaba, kwabe sekungena indlala, kwabe sekungena inhlupheko, kwabe sekungena bonke ubunzima obunye babo obusasekhona namhlanje. Kodwa ke ngoba Isilo Dinuzulu wabona ukuthi imfundo iyona ebaluleke kakhulu engasikhipha, which can free our nation from the various social ills, we honor him and we thank him for having made sure that education became a very important shield that our people could use. In the 1950s and the 1960s, only 10% of abantu balapha eMzantsi Afrika had completed 12 years of education. That number today is more than 60%. Okusho ukuthi lembewu eyatshalwa Isilo Dinuzulu yokuthi sithande imfundo iyabonakala namhlanje. Abantu abaningi sebayafunda. Abantu abaningi sebangena isikolo njengoba yena wacindezela ukuthi yebo singene isikolo. In South Africa today, access to quality education is breaking the cycle of intergenerational poverty, infusing young people with academic knowledge and growing the future citizens and the leaders of South Africa. So as we celebrate King Dinuzulu's life, we also celebrate the efforts that he made to develop our people, to spread knowledge, to spread the arts. He was not only a warrior, he was not only a victim of prison, but he sought to overcome all that. And we thank him because the culture that he put amongst us is helping to build our nation today. The pro-poor policies of the ANC-led government continue to support learners along their educational journey, just as he did in his own royal household. This includes millions of learners getting a nutritious meal at school each day to support their development, early childhood development, no-fee schools, free school transport, and childcare grants. King Dinuzulu would be proud of the efforts that are being made all over the country when it comes to education, but also especially here in KwaZulu-Natal. When we look at the results, the matric results of 2023, we see a great improvement nalapha KwaZulu-Natal when we see the bachelor pass rate yalapha kule province ilokukhuphuka iyaphezulu. Siyambonga isilo sethu Dinuzulu for planting the seeds of education. The arts that King Dinuzulu was exposed to in prison are available in our schools: musical instruments, singing and drama, and others. On this auspicious occasion, we cannot but reflect on the qualities of leadership embodied by King Dinuzulu. Ubuholi bakhe ngendlela wayehola isizwe sikaZulu ngayo into efanele ukuthi sifunde kuyona. The king did not fight battles of greed and unchecked power for self-gain. He did not ascend to the throne to enrich himself and ignore the plight of the people. Uma sithi sifuna intsha yethu ikwazi ukuthi ifunde izimele ngokwayo, sithi sifuna ukuthi bafunde kwindlela isilo uDinuzulu wayeziphathe ngayo. His wars were all wars for peace and restoration of the dignity of the Zulu kingdom and its people. He supported the Bambata rebellion that was led by Nkosi Bambata in 1906, which earned him another prison sentence. King Dinuzulu did not see the struggle of freedom of the Zulu nation as separate from the struggle for freedom of all South Africans. His political liberation journey, in his journey, he embraced all those who were like-minded and collaborated with players from diverse backgrounds, and that became his signature. The king was a non-racialist in his approach to nation building. He was able to extend a hand to many other races and work with them and live with them. When he was exiled to St. Helena, for instance, he arrived there with an entourage of 20 people. Amongst them were his 2 wives, his 2 uncles, including Shingana, a doctor, a translator, an advisor, as well as Harriet Colenso, the sister, Francis Colenso, Harriet Colenso's sister, who was one of the missionaries here in KZN. Yes, he also forged relations with the Boers who were here in KZN, and it was his relationship with some of them that was able to get him released from prison in Newcastle. He also forged relations with some leaders of the Indian community around Durban. When the king passed away in 8 Cake on the 18th of October 1913, one of the people at his bedside as he was coming to the end of his life was the young Mahatma Gandhi. Ukubonisayo ukuthi he was broad, he was diverse, and this is the type of leader that we would like South Africans to familiarize themselves with. Because today, as we commemorate this important life, we also should look into our history and look at the gigantic figures that graced the soil of this nation and made an indelible contribution to what we are today as a nation. As the lifelong president of the ANC, King Dinuzulu taught us well, we will never abandon our commitment to the principles of non-racialism and in realizing a South Africa that is truly non-racial, non-sexist, prosperous, and free. King Dinuzulu was a man of great humility, despite his stature of being the Isilo Samazulu. Despite being a king, he surrounded himself with wise counsel. He was close friends with the first president of the African National Congress, Dr. John Langalibalele Dube. He was very close to Pixley Kaisa Kaseme, his son-in-law, Walter Khubusana, as well as other liberation struggle luminaries. They collaborated to defend our sovereignty and dignity. I always heard Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi talking about the king very fondly over the years that I knew Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. It was this cooperation between traditional leaders and the educated people, izifundiswa, which led, yes, to the formation of the ANC. The king subjected himself to the collective leadership of the time. He led and accepted being led for the benefit of his people. Wayeyinkokheli, inkokheli ephezu kwezo zonke inkokheli, kodwa wazithoba ngaso sonke isikhathi wathi nami ngizawukhokhelwa noma ngiyisilo. Today, society is burdened by leaders who refuse to be led. City, if you are a leader, you must be willing and be prepared to be led by others as well. Ufanele ukuthi nawe uholwe abanye. These leaders refuse to be led, and they use their past and current leadership roles to sow division, to sow fear and hate among South Africans. They even threaten violence and mayhem against the democratic state and the laws of the republic. Let me be clear, kubo labo abathusa isizwe sala eSouth Africa, uma kungayenzeki lento abazifunayo. I want to be clear ukuthi ngeke size sikuvumele lokho. Asinawuvuma ukuthi kube nabantu abazomosha le democracy esinayo. We will follow in the footsteps of King Dinuzulu and forge ahead with uniting our nation. We must and we will resist and defeat the merchants of destruction that are amongst us, just as King Dinuzulu did. Labo abasabisa ngokuphehla indushu, we say to them, you will never succeed. Undweshu, yes, that's the Zulu word. Udweshu, emphakathini. Sethi ngeke nikwazi ukuphumelela. On this 110th anniversary commemoration of one of the greatest forebears of our country, we must ensure that the story of this son of the African soil is not lost in the history of our nation, but that it continues to be told by generations to come. Ekuseqinisweni, uma sikhuluma ngoDinuzulu, we are really talking about the history of our nation as it proceeded through struggle, as it triumphed against oppression and apartheid, as government departments, as provinces, as municipalities, we continue to uphold and embrace the heritage and the liberation history of our country. We must ensure that the history that is to be told through the lives of our forebears continues to be told. It is also important that those events and activities that have defined our nation should be told in broad terms. For instance, important battles like the Battle of Isandlwana, important battles and wars that were fought in many parts of the country, the 100-year wars that were fought in the Eastern Cape, the struggles that were waged by many of our kings and queens, those must be told. It is also important that our academics and intellectuals should be engaged in the documentation of our history. For us to know where we are going, we have to know where we come from as a people. Ukuze sazi ukuthi siyaphi, kufanele ukuthi sazi ukuthi sivelaphi. With the foundation laid down by our forebears, such as King Dinuzulu, we shall overcome poverty. We shall overcome inequality. We shall also overcome unemployment and underdevelopment. We are mindful that the struggle for liberation was waged by those who were robbed of enjoying their own youth, as was the case with King Dinuzulu. We shall not fail to make them proud. We shall ensure that their struggle and sacrifice was not in vain. We shall ensure that we leave no one behind. I want to end by applauding the work that is being done by our provincial government here. Some of the thoughts that were put forward by our Premier, working together with our MECs in KZN, including the efforts that are being made to address the challenges of water, to address the challenges of unemployment, to promote cooperatives, is exactly what we need to appreciate. Going forward, we need to work harder to improve the lives of our people. That is precisely what we all should be involved in. We've got a great legacy. Sihamba lapho kuke kahamba khona amaqhawe. Amaqhawe afana neSilo uDinuzulu. And we cannot lower the standard. Istandard sethu sifana ukuthi sibe phezulu ngazo zonke ikhathi. Ngoba uma sibuka imisebenzi eyenzwe inkokheli zethu zendabuko, inkokheli zethu the historical leaders, we see great achievements. The building of our nation, we see great movement forward. Nathi namhlanje, as we commemorate this great life of Isilo uDinuzulu, I would say let us all join hands together as all South Africans, not only as Amazulu. We should not only remember him as Amazulu, we should remember Dinuzulu as a nation builder, a builder of the broad nation that we are today as South Africans. He must be uplifted as being one of our great heroes. And I am proud that I've had a king like King Cyril Dinuzulu, whom I also regard as my king. Ngiyabonga.
Singaphinde sihlonze kangaka. Siyabonga KwaZulu Natal.